So I need to walk around and take a video of repairs that need to be made on a front porch. The project began, it just needed to be scraped and painted. But when I went to go look at it, there was a little bit more that had to be done. So the person who owns this building is out of state for the winter, and I'm going to take a video now, and I figured I'd bring you along with me so that I can show her the different repairs that probably should be made sooner rather than later. So let's go take a look. When I came over to look at this, I noticed, I don't know if you can see on the camera, there's some water staining coming down on this side on the front. So there's water staining right in here. So I noticed that, which tells me there's a bit of a water problem. So let's go upstairs and take a look at what I found. Inside the building now, as we go up the stairs, I'm just going to take a little video here because last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago now, I painted all the walls and trim in the front hall of this building. So it really spruced it up quite a bit. There was some damage here. People try to move furniture from furniture moving companies up these old staircases. And modern couches don't really fit in these old houses. It was a gray color before, and it just brightened up the space. So let's go out here and take a look. Unlike the first story of this porch, the second story still has the original 1915 railings, and they're a little worse for the wear. They're still in decent shape though. So the plan here, this is a lead paint operation. The proper way to do this will be to just sarcophagus this in plastic. I'm going to take the railings off the house and then take them into my shop where I can completely strip the lead paint off of these railings. Now, like I said, the 1915 railings are in excellent condition, except this one here. This one has been repaired sometime in the past. It has started to rot, so you can just pick the wood off of there, and these pieces connected to it are all terrible. So while the 1915 railings are completely solid, no rot, the railing that was repaired, oh, it's a complete replacement. This is a completely new railing. This is a newer, I'd say within the last 20 to 30 years railing, is completely rotten. So this will need to be rebuilt to copy the other three. So this needs a new railing. Just this one section. The other sections can be stripped and saved. Also on the porch, the person who redid the roof deck about 15 years ago used particle board for the floor. And I'll show you where that's become a little bit of an issue. So especially here at the columns, this is soft in here. That's all soft. Over here is especially bad. I don't know if you can see the sponginess on camera or not, but this is all, oh yeah, it's all mush. That all needs to come out. So the only way to repair this is to take it all up. And again, it's particle board. It's all those little pieces of wood that are sandwiched together and glued. It's a substrate, it's not a finished product, and that's what happens to it after it gets wet for 15 years. Up on the ceiling we have 1915 beadboard that is not in great shape. It's if you press on it up there, it's holding on by a thread. But with that, I think I can get away with just lightly scraping the loose stuff off. I'll put a primer on there, and we're just gonna paint it for this time. The rest of it, however, the floor over here on the close to the house where it's undercover, it's fine. But over there, right along the edges, it's smushy. Against the house, the as you can tell, vinyl siding needs to be washed up. That'll wash right out. So we'll get a pressure washer up here and just wash that up. This window has someone got a bunch of paint all over it, so that could be scraped. This could come off and get washed. Just some things to gussy it up. And of course that door needs to come off, come into the shop and get refinished. So let's head back to the shop and figure out what this is gonna cost. This ceiling was redone at the same time the floor was redone. So this is a newer ceiling, but coming right over here, I can see where the floor has failed above. It has started to come down and put the new ceiling at risk. So definitely needs to be repaired. Old house is the gift that keeps on giving, really. Yeah, so there's a little repair work that needs to happen. It's kind of a surprise. I hadn't gone out on that deck for a year or two and hadn't noticed that there was any degradation in the floor. But this year, when I was poking around to see what I was going to have to do to repair the railings, just to paint them, I came across the spongy part of the floor in the corners and at the edges. So came back to the shop, put together some numbers, and let's take a look at the Bad News Express here. We'll start with the floor. It's 180 square feet, and I priced out the flooring material at $13.79. So what I use for flooring material is a fir tongue and groove porch flooring that has to be treated on all sides. You can't just put it down bare. You need to do the underneath with some sort of finish as well. So that's what I use. To get 180 square feet, I need 693 linear feet of 5/4, by 4 fir tongue and groove porch flooring. And it's $1.99 a linear foot, and we need $1,379 worth of fir hardwood flooring. That'll look great and will keep the water out. The removal and disposal of the particle board floor, I figure, is going to be about $300. That's materials and labor. I stuck this in after doing the final totals. Need a $75 gallon of oil-based stain. I use Australian timber oil by Cabot. It works great at keeping water out of these floors. So yeah, 693 feet, that's $13.79 for the materials. I'm going to need a roll of Grace Ice and Water Shield, which courtesy of inflation is up to about $200 now. So we'll need that. And then for the installation, I just figured out how many hours it's going to take me. So I've gone through in my mind, I got to do the pre-stain of the floor, which requires laying the entire floor out in a driveway, staining both sides, and getting it ready for installation. That's a process in itself. It just takes forever to do when you're dealing with that much wood, having to lay it all out. Thankfully, I have the room to do it. Then we got to install the new floor, which, we'll put a Grace Ice and Water Shield underlayment. And I like to bring the floor up about 1/4 of an inch strapping I put down before I put the floor down, just to give it a little breathing room underneath. And then all the associated hardware. So labor and all that installation. Most of the installation is going to be the staining. comes to $19.25. So $38.79, that was all chicken scratched, for the flooring. And I'll show you what a piece of that flooring looks like. I just happen to have some in stock. So this here is the fir tongue and groove porch floor. It's a great product, pretty knot-free, looks fabulous, and this actually does have one coat of Australian timber oil, and you can get it in all sorts of different colors, the timber oil. I'd probably do darker for this. It has a mahogany colored paint on the first floor porch, so I'd probably get it a little darker. But this stuff works great, nails right in with a floor nailer, and looks fabulous when done. Here, I'll show you a picture of a project I did just last year with a fir porch floor. I don't think I've ever put a first coat of oil-based stain on anything outside in March, but I did today. What a lovely day in Maine. I don't know what the high was, but it had to have been close to 60. All right, so that's the floor. Let's take a look at the railing. As you saw, we need to replace one of the railings that actually is the only railing that's ever been replaced on the house. It just so happens that subpar materials were used, and that's the one that rotted out. The original 1915 railings are just fine. They just need to be stripped of their lead paint and repainted. I do have to recreate one, however, so let's take a look at that. So for the railing, we're going to just build one replica railing. The original 3 1915 railings are fine. We just need to build a new one for the one that was replaced. I'm thinking within the last 20 to 30 years, maybe a little bit longer, but there's one that's rotten, so we'll build a replica. I feel like I can do that, materials and labor, for about $325. So this is adding up quickly, as the original intent of working on this house this year, and all we were going to do was scrape and paint the railings and columns, but it's a little worse for the wear. So finally we get to the actual painting of it all. So let's take a look at what it's going to cost to paint this thing. For the column and trim painting, so there's some trim around the door, there's also the door itself, and a little trim around the window. The house itself is vinyl sided, and as you saw, it was filthy. I'll take a pressure washer and some Dawn dish detergent and clean that off. But anyway, so we got to strip the lead paint, sand and prime the columns with an oil-based primer. Anything exterior, Ben Moore, they have a Fresh Start product, which most people purchase just in their water-based formula, but they do have an oil-based Fresh Start, which if you're doing any exterior work on an old house, you're never going to get away with just using a water-based Fresh Start primer on the outside of the house. It will peel within 5 years. Use an oil-based primer and you're going to get fabulous results. In fact, I'll show you an example. So as an example of oil versus water-based primer being used on the exterior of a house, I'm going to take you to my house. So in 2010, I pulled all the vinyl siding off of my house and went back to the clapboards that were underneath. On this side of the house, I painted it myself. I scraped it, sanded it, got as much paint off as possible, used an oil-based primer, and top coated that in 2010. 3 years ago, I didn't have time to paint my own house, and the back was due, and I had someone paint this, a professional painter, and they barely sanded, used a water-based primer, and put a top coat on, and as you can see, it already needs to be redone. So that's another thing on my list, painting the back of my own house. The whole thing is just peeling right off. This is a 3-year-old paint job with water-based primer, and that's a 13-year-old paint job with oil-based primer. All right, then we go to lightly scrape, then prime, and paint the ceiling. So when I paint that ceiling, I'm just gonna lightly scrape it. I'm gonna just put a little coat of primer on there, and then I'm gonna spray the ceiling because it's tender up there. I mean, it's gonna be fine. It's not gonna fall down, but I definitely don't want to accelerate its tenderness. So I am going to just lightly scrape, and then I'm gonna use a spray painter, an air spray painter, and just put a top coat on that to make it look decent. Then I'm going to take the storm door, sand it, and restain it, which will make that look great. And then we got to put a top coat. We got to put 2 coats of a top coat, all white, on all the surfaces, the trim and the columns. So for just the finish painting, which is the intent of the original product, it's 1870. That's kind of where we were expecting to be before the porch floor became an issue. So let's take a look at total cost. Well, now we can take a look at totals. So for the floor, went over that, $38.79. So that's labor and materials. To get that floor in, there's a little work with the post. You got to joist each post up one at a time, slide the floor under. So there's a lot of labor costs there, but $38.79 for the floor. For that one section of railing, it's going to be $325 to recreate a railing that matches the other 3. And then finally, to paint the whole deal, railings, column, all the trim, the storm door, we're looking at $22.40. And that's a lead safe paint prep, so we'll do it in such a way to keep all those lead paint chips out of the environment and especially away from children. It's really dangerous. Lead, that is really dangerous for small children. So got to be careful with that. So total there's $22.40, a grand total to get that porch back in line and ready to go for another 50 years. $6,444. So that just about does it for this estimate. That's how I go about doing it. Let me know below in the comments how you might concoct an estimate for a client who needs porch repairs. But that's just how I quickly do it, and thank you for joining me. We'll be back to another project next time we meet, and I'll catch you then on the next one.